What's up, traders, and welcome back to Uplift Markets. It's Friday, and today's recap is all about the banks. We had JPMorgan, Wells Fargo, Morgan Stanley, and BlackRock all reporting earlier this morning, and the numbers came in hot. We'll break down what they reported, how the market reacted, and wrap it up with a look at the overall Nasdaq heading into next week. So, let's get into it. Let's begin initially with JPMorgan. The banking giant crushed expectations of EPS coming in at $5.07 versus $4.63 expected. That is a 9.4% increase to the upside, and revenue came at $45 billion compared to $43.99 billion forecasted. The strong beat was driven by consumer banking and trading, and chart-wise, JPMorgan is trading above a key area of support, which is a 200 EMA. Let's go over to the daily chart on JPMorgan and analyze this more thoroughly. So we have the price action today. We closed at 238 today, and as we can see, we're currently below areas of support, which is a 50, but we closed above the 200 period today, which is a pretty good sign. Now, if we plot an anchored VWAP from this low, which is where the buyers came in, that's why it's green, and then plot an anchored VWAP from where the sellers came in, that's why it's red, called the swing high anchored VWAP, we see that we are currently in between this price action. What this shows is that there seems to be indecision between the buyers and sellers, and until we get a profound break above or below, we'll start seeing the trend continuation, right? So the only way to be bullish this name is for JPMorgan to break above the $247 level. That would instantiate the movement towards the upside, and the sellers who would be, are currently in control, they would be losing money, the average price of around 238, and the buyers would have defended the level properly, moving closer towards the upside. Now, if we do fail the $223 level, which is that swing low anchored VWAP, or the green where the buyers came in, then we will be expecting further downside. It all depends obviously on the overall market news and the sentiment on the broader economy. Now, another bank that also reported was Wells Fargo. This bank has been extraordinarily different from the rest of the banks. And what I mean by this is that they had EPS of 139 versus the expected of 123. And it was good, right? It was a 13.42% upside movement, but the revenue slightly missed at $20.15 billion compared to the forecasted of $20.72 billion. Now, the miss came from shrinking net interest income, but overall consumer credit metrics were stable, which is a good sign. Now, analyzing it on a daily chart and how we can possibly trade after the earnings, we see that the name has been as well under key areas of support, right? We are below the 50 and below the 200. This is looking worse than JPMorgan. JPMorgan is looking more towards the upside. In this case, the stock is completely broken. We have filled the 50 EMA and the 200 EMA. Now, if we plot this anchored VWAP from the high, from the sellers came in, right? We were all-time highs, and then we quadrupled towards the downside. And we see that the average short participant entered the name at $71, and they're currently in the money. We had buyers show up at this anchored VWAP, which is the 2024 anchored VWAP. So the VWAP that marks the average entry price of market participants since the beginning of the bull market, you could say, where it really had that profound impact around 2024. And we found exactly buyers there. Look at these wicks. Bottom wicks, we declined, but buyers came in. Decline, buyers came in. Decline, buyers came in today. So it shows that there's a key area of support here. Now, the thing to keep in mind here is that the buyers here have to defend their levels. We have to see them overwhelm the sellers who are currently, we know, are actually in the money right now. And in order to bring the stock higher and be long, we would have to close above $72 in order to continue that. Now, what I do expect here is that if this does become an area of support, we will see bounces towards the 200 EMA and possibly this area of resistance, which is a swing high anchored VWAP. We could play this towards the long side with the bounce and have our first price target, take half profits at 67, and the rest would be taken out 71. And this would allow us to, in a way, take advantage of the moves and also reduce our risk, right? We don't always want to stay too long in the trend. But like I said again, if the sellers come in aggressively and the buyers fail to hold this level like we said here, then we'll be seeing more further downside continuation on Wells Fargo, probably towards this area of support of $53. Should be a downside target on that. Like we said, we always want to be in favor of the trend, right? The longer term trend here is telling us the downside. We have, right, lower highs, lower lows, lower low, right, and a lower high, right? So this shows that overall sellers are winning in this name. Now moving on to another company or bank that reported was Morgan Stanley. And this one actually surprised me, and I'm guessing a lot of investors, due to the fact that overall they had probably one of the best earnings out of these banks. And the main reason for that was that they had EPS of 260 versus the expected of 221. That is a surprise of 17%, almost 18%, which is pretty outstanding. The revenue came in higher as well of 17.74 billion versus the expected of 16.54 billion. And the strength came from wealth management and an increase in equity trading. And it also shows that, investors, there's a lot of individuals putting money into the market here, right, based on Q1. Now, looking at the technicals, and which is the most important aspect of this, we had the news earnings, but how can we play this? Well, it's quite simple on Morgan Stanley. The stock is still broken, all right? We are below the 50 and below 200. Collectively, sellers are winning. But we found support again at the 2024 year-to-date anchored VWAP. We're seeing that throughout the banks, there seems to exist this pattern that collectively the buyers who came in at the beginning of the year 2024, which is kind of when we had that big up move in the bull market, we have found support, meaning that they're still interested in the assets or here in the equity, and they are heavily trying to defend the levels against these sellers. What we're seeing here is a short-term trend mixing with a longer-term trend. We have the shorter-term bearish trend ever since the new administration entered, and the overall longer-term trend that we have seen since the bull market, right? And those are right now mixing, they're clashing. The moment here is which one of them will prevail. And this is very important to analyze here. And currently, the sellers are winning. But we did see a nice bounce today, right? We opened at 102 and closed around 108. If we continue seeing this strong bid, then we can do the same thing as other charts. Go long the name, take half profits at this resistance level, and let the rest run, right? This could be a nice move. This could be used during a day trade, right? Or you can swing trade this, right? Even through options. Something that we should be remaining in constant attention is to see if when we achieve this level, are we going to reject heavily? If so, that shows that the sellers are still aggressive and we usually don't want to interfere with them, right? We want to let the market tell us where to enter and why to enter. So I'm going to be plotting an increase from this low, making it green, showing that the buyers came in there. And it all depends if they hold that level. What I'm saying is if we find the bid, we reject this, and we fail this swing low anchored VWAP, we will see that downside continuation, and Morgan Stanley could be played to the short regardless of the overall earnings. I repeat, this is for a day trade, even swing trade, but longer term investing, this bank is looking extremely well, and I think believing that it's trading at a discount would be a nice pickup from here. Finally, we have our last bank that reported, and that was BlackRock. Overall, BlackRock has been, how can I say it? It's been amazing in the way of its performance on the earnings. It had an EPS of $11.30 versus the expected of $10.08. That is a 12% surprise, which is quite nice. The revenue was 5.28 and essentially came in line with the expectations. Now, something that is amazing to see is that the assets under management passed $10.5 trillion, showing that there was massive inflows. And extraordinarily, the stock isn't so bullish here if you look at it on a daily chart. The stock is clearly below the 50 and 200, and like I said before, the swing high anchored VWAP, where the sellers came in, and they're obviously winning, right? We're below that. But buyers came in here as well, near this level of 896. Now, the same play can be made here. If this is a little short-term rally or bounce, right, that's matching within the overall market, then we can see the movement towards the 200, which would be at 933. And to be fully bullish to name, we'd have to get above 958 in order to have that movement toward the upside continuation. But right now, the overall trend is favoring the shorts, and they will keep being in the money as long as a price action remains below this red swing high anchored VWAP, because they are willing to defend their levels. So overall, all four names beat EPS expectations, which shows strength in the financials. But something to keep an eye on is the leadership comments, which were pretty cautious. They repeatedly had the same pattern of that, they were watching for inflation, for rates, and obviously geopolitical risks. But zooming out and now looking at the overall market, we can look at the triple Q, the NASDAQ. We had, like I said, a nice bounce. Do you guys see that there seems to be a correlation between the overall market and the banks, right? They kind of have the same pattern, right? We sold heavily and now we're starting to see it bounce. So in this case, we had support at that area previously, but we sliced it like butter. We later came to these areas of support of 413.40, and I told you why we bounced off those areas, because they were they were previous support levels right here. So, and that's exactly where we bounced off of. Now on this day, where we had this intense rally on Wednesday, we actually bumped up to that area and resisted it. Basically, we found resistance there, some sellers. What this could be interpreted as is the people who went long believing that this VWAP would hold actually covered and sold in order to be flat, and that caused that downside movement. But what I liked today was that we had a nice upside move, a nice candle. This could possibly achieve again the resistance levels of 465, test it again, and even possibly go towards a 50. The thing here is that we want the buyers to hold the higher low that they created. This higher low right here, mark it right there. This higher low. We want to see this higher low and continuation to the upside. But if the sellers, like I said, are still heavily invested, they will bring it down. And if we fail that, we will see further downside over the triple Q back again towards 413 or 395. And also something to keep in mind is that we are currently below the 50 and 200, and we are forming here, this one, a death cross, which does have some relevance towards other traders who do believe in that system, right? And it does cause a psychological perception about the markets, but it all depends on current sentiment and what the overall administration comes up with the news and all the tariffs, and hopefully it doesn't really impact the market too much. But overall, we can say that the momentum is in a way neutral. We're kind of digesting the sentiment, and the VIX cooled slightly. So something that's really important to look out for next week would be on the earnings, which would be Netflix and Tesla, I believe, in order to gauge the real potential move that these tariffs would have and see how these names react to the possible implementation of these tariffs. So overall, that's a wrap for today. The banks came in strong and the triple Q is stabilizing. And as we know, next week is going to be a big one. So, as always, be careful, manage your risk, and don't let the market whip you out.